Okay. Well, happy Sunday, March 12th. As Christine Glenn reminded me last week, is our second March 12th Awakening Day. So happy Awakening Day to everybody. And this is the CWG Book Club sponsored by the Evolution Revolution and Humanities team. And we are on book 3. I should mention, if you don't know this, the book is by Neil Donald Walsh. And I believe we were on chapter 4. And
we finished chapter 4, but we were going to talk some more before we went on. Yeah.
Right. And in case I didn't say my name, I'm Nanette Kennedy. Welcome, everybody. I didn't reread the chapter, but I had a couple of things marked. And let's see. I don't know what page it is in your books, but it's the page that has a statement from Neil saying, "Are you really always giving everyone exactly what they desire at any given time?" And God says, "Yes, my beloved, I am. Your life is a reflection of what you desire and what you believe you may have of what you desire. I cannot give you what you do not believe you may have, no matter how much you desire it, because I will not violate your own thought about it. I cannot, that is the law. Believing that you cannot have something is the same thing as not desiring to have it, for it produces the same result." And I had a little trouble with that, God's answer, because it made me think of people who have sick children or children that die young. And are you really always giving everyone exactly what they desire at any given time? Does anybody want to comment to that?
Well, don't forget that the children of those parents also have desires and beliefs. And so even though the parent may not desire it, what's happening to the child may be something that the child is creating. I just throw that out there as a thought.
That's a very good point.
Because we're co-creating our experiences with those around us.
And I believe that before we embody, we have a clear outline of what it's going to be like, and then we take on the veils of forgetfulness. And there's a divine dance that is more than any one finite mind can know.
It's a really important point. Go ahead.
Today's quote, daily quotations from book 1 says, "The person who has the faith to move mountains and dies 6 weeks later has moved mountains for 6 weeks. That may have been enough for him."
Wow.
Right.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Were you going to add something, Linda?
Well, just it's a really important point because, what God talks about with Neil is that in any given moment, everything is perfect. He says that over and over again, and this is what he means, is in that moment, even though there may be, a dying child or whatever, that what's being expressed is perfection. And rather than rejecting or resisting what we're being given, accepting it and embracing it is what allows us to learn from it. Because if we reject it or push it away, then we've closed ourselves off from any offering that it has, from any wisdom that it might provide us.
Resistance and persistence are partners.
Correct.
Well, and what I was thinking too, hearing all these different things and about the moving the mountain for 12 weeks might be just all the extra time that person wanted. It made me think about, and we've talked about this somewhat in the how many ever books we've been reading, is that, and this a great example of me forgetting my kids have their own journey, and they've got their own contract, if you will. And I can't remember the name of the book, and I'm not going to look for it right now, but it's this beautiful book about when people cross over, that they're the ones that are saying, yes, I'm ready to go. And this beautiful book, it explains how some people are put in our lives to just be here for a short while, or whenever we meet them, they're only in our lives for a short while. So it makes more sense to me now that everybody's kind of weighed in on this. And I think that's one of the hardest lessons with children, period. You know, whether they're living or crossed over, is that they've got their own path. And as much as we might want to put a bubble around them, it doesn't work that way. Another thing I had marked was Neil saying, once when I was meditating, I had the experience of total oneness, total awareness. It was wonderful. It was ecstatic. Ever since then, I have been trying to have that experience again. I sit in meditation and try to have that total awareness again. And I have never been able to. This is the reason, right? You're saying to me that as long as I am seeking to have something, I cannot have it, because my very seeking is a statement that I do not now have it. The same wisdom you have been giving me throughout this dialogue. And God says, yes, yes, now you understand. It is becoming more clear to you now. That is why we keep going around in circles here. That is why we keep repeating things, revisiting things. You get it the third, fourth, maybe the fifth time around. And last week, when Linda, when you were reading that, and I've kind of gotten out of the habit of meditation, I probably should get back into it. But when I was really on a roll with my meditation, I would just kind of let whatever happen, you know. And it took a while to get there, because I do different meditations, some where you're lying down and it's a visually led meditation, some where you're sitting and you don't have any other, you know, exterior stuff going on except for barking dogs and that kind of thing. But once you quit trying to get to that place that's so wonderful, it was, for me, was really easy to get into that place. I could even do it if my daughter had to run into the store for 10 minutes. I could put my car seat back and I could get there in about 2 minutes. And it was a really cool thing. But it's surprising to me, I guess this is the point I was going to make. And who knows, because this book was written so long ago, if Neil has been able to get to that point again. I just wondered what everybody else thought about that.
I had that experience once. The oneness.
And have you ever had it more than once?
Well, I had a death experience where I crossed over and I came back. So like it was this whole like period after that where it was like I was living in between two worlds. So I had that experience, and I don't know how to explain it because it seems like I really have like latched on to my like physical existence now, and really enjoying it, because for a long time after that I was like really depressed and like grossed out at being human, and I'd like see what humans do and it would make me want to retch, and I'd just be like really like detached from all that. So like now it's just like I don't even really pursue it. I just really try to be present at all times and like just really love like every part of like being human, because I feel like I came back for a reason. So I don't know, I guess I gave up on the search for it because it wasn't like something that serves me anymore. But yeah, but I know what Neil's talking about. I had that experience. I don't know if anybody else has had something similar like that.
I just feel, I mean, I'm a long time meditator, and I love meditating, and I feel that since I, began meditating, I don't know, 25 years ago or so, that the quality of my experience being embodied is just so much less dramatic and chaotic than it was before I found meditation. So I don't think I've ever had an experience of unconditional self-love, which is, I know what that feeling would be, but I will always, try and love myself more than not less, because I think children, the vast majority of children on this planet anyway, get conditioned to believe they're not worthy. But, learning to love myself, I know is my main function here. That's my job, is to love myself the way that God loves me. And what I focus on a lot is my breath. I like to breathe consciously. And I think I've told this group before that in 2011, we tried to get 1 billion people to breathe together as one on November the 11th. And Rabia traveled with Michael Beckwith all that summer, explaining, do as one breath in one day. And I think we had 38,000 people on the line at 11 a.m. Pacific on November the 11th, and we crashed the lines. But now we've projected to have 1 billion people breathe together as one on November the 11th, 2020 at 11 a.m. your time, no matter where you are. So I think, focusing on my breath has really been a great learning for me, because when I was a child, I had no idea about the power of my breath. But yeah, so I'm grateful for that. I'm complete.
I have that experience quite often in meditation. And when it first started, when I was first able to do it, I didn't want to come back. Like when I got into that place of oneness, I didn't want to come back for my meditation. Because it's such a different place, that place. But now it's easier to come back, and it's not as jarring, because I don't have as much attachment to the physical realm and to what's happening in the physical realm. So it's, and I don't have the judgment. I think if you still have judgment about the third dimension and what happens in the third dimension, I think it's really difficult to experience that feeling of oneness and to go into that place we call the unified field. But once you've let go of judgment, then it becomes a lot more fluid, and you can kind of go and come, and it's not as difficult or as disruptive, if that makes any sense.
It does, and I think that there's that saying, if you don't go within, you go without. And I have a very busy mind, and which is why I know that I need to get back to my meditations. And sometimes I can actually get to that place by watching something silly on Netflix, because the whole world outside of me is not my focus, and then I'm focusing on something that's either completely out of my realm of reality or something that I can really relate to. But I try to stay away from the stuff I can really relate to, because then I start to wander and start thinking or / worrying about things that are absolutely out of my control. So I do think there are different, even listening to music sometimes for me can be just a meditation, where you're just one with the music. And I had a professor who was describing oneness back when nobody was talking about oneness. And he said, how many people in here have ever played an instrument? About half the class raised their hands. And he said, well, that part where you're not thinking about the notes you're playing? It's like your consciousness has come down your arms and into your fingers for whatever instrument, or your hands, for whatever instrument you're playing. And that was the best description of oneness for me that I could understand, is that when you kind of pass through this window or door, and I can do this even while I'm typing. I can be typing so fast and I'm just really into it. I'm not looking down. I'm just doing my typing. All of a sudden I go, wow, I am really typing. And I start screwing up, And my son has said this about playing the guitar. I used to play the guitar, so I can relate to it. If I start thinking about, wow, I am doing a handy dandy job here, I've come out of that oneness moment and I've become the observer, or not the observer, or maybe the observer.
The ego.
Yeah. So I think oneness can come to us in many ways. And anyway, that's all I have to say on that one. If anybody else wants to add.
I think it's brilliant, Matt, because... Oh, go ahead.
Actually, no, I was going on another subject, so you go first.
Oh, I was just going to say that's brilliant, Matt, because being present, even if you're not like in the pixelated grayness of oneness, just being present to what you're doing. If you're eating a really yummy sandwich, like Neil says about the salami, if you're just being present in that moment, you're really there. You're just in a different conceptualization of it. So you could be having a conversation with somebody that's really warming your heart and making you feel expanded, or you could be watching a show or something. It's just really about being present to where you're at, and you're in the oneness. So I think when I said seeking out that place for me doesn't serve me anymore, it's I just feel I couldn't seek it anymore. I just had to be present to it at all times. So what you're saying about being present really makes sense.
Thank you.
The thing I was going to say was just quickly that there's another thing that to me is really important in this last chapter, and I know Neil says it comes up a lot, but it's about forgiveness. It's on page 87 in my book, but where God says, others may not forgive you, but I do. And then God goes on to talk about kind of non-traditional forgiveness. I don't need to forgive you, because in this new way we're looking at things, that there's no need, because we're all one. But I think that's a really important passage there, because I'm a counsellor and I work with people who often can't forgive themselves for things. So what God says there is really profound for me.
Yes, it is, Sarah. It is. And I find that being grateful is also a spectacular key. Just to be grateful for what you have in this moment. And, you know, yeah.
And to both these points, I think that forgiveness, you know, because I've heard so many people talk about it in different ways, that nobody needs to be forgiven, they're already forgiven, or you don't need to forgive yourself because you're already forgiven. And I'm glad I've gotten so much better about not doing things that I'm thinking that I need forgiveness. And believe me, I'm not walking on water, but it feels so much better when you can go easy on yourself and say, yeah, I wish I wouldn't have done that, but I did, and that's history. And I used to give myself, this was like starting 25 years ago, I would give myself an hour because I wasn't, you know, where I am now. I would give myself an hour to do the mental stuff that goes on in your head where you're regretting you did something. And then after that hour, that's all I was going to give it. And it took time for me to get to that. But I think it's really helpful because we're most hard on ourselves. I am such a forgiving person, because it doesn't do any harm. It only harms me to not be forgiving, and it just makes me feel uncomfortable. So, I think forgiveness is a very important topic, and I think when we're better in touch with ourselves, we're better about doing that with ourselves. Over. Okay, I have another part here. Let's see. I'm going to have to read this part in order to get everybody back to the place of it. Neil had just said, you know, this is the kind of stuff that makes people run to jump off the Empire State Building, shouting, "I am God, look at me, I can fly." And God says, you'd better be in a state of total awareness before you do that. If you have to prove yourself to be God by demonstrating it to others, then you do not know yourself to be, and this is not knowing will demonstrate itself in your reality. In short, you will fall flat on your face. God seeks to prove itself to no one, for God has no need to do that. God is, and that is what is so. Those who know themselves to be one with God or have the experience of God within have no need, nor do they seek to prove to anyone, least of all themselves. And so it was that when they taunted him, saying, "If you are the Son of God, come down from that cross," the man called Jesus did nothing. Yet 3 days later, quietly and unobtrusively, when there were no witnesses and no crowds and no one to whom to prove anything, he did something a great deal more astonishing, and the world has been talking about it ever since. And in this miracle is found your salvation, for you have been shown the truth, not only of Jesus, but of who you are, and may thus be saved from the lie about yourself, which you have been told and which you have accepted as truth, or your truth. God invites you always to be your highest thought about yourself. There are those on your planet right now who have manifested many of these higher thoughts, including causing physical objects to appear and disappear, making themselves appear and disappear, even living forever in the body or coming back to the body and living again. And all of this has been made possible because of their faith, because of their knowing, because of their immutable clarity about how things are and how things are meant to be. And while in the past, whenever people in earthly form have done these things, you have called these events miracles and have made the people saints and saviors, yet there are no more saints and saviors than you. for you are all saints and saviors, which is the very message they have been bringing you. Neil says, how can I believe that? I want to believe that with all my heart, but I can't. I just can't. And God says, no, you cannot believe it. You can only know it. And I'm going to use the example of riding a bicycle. You can watch somebody riding a bicycle. You can see pictures of a bicycle. You can see pictures of somebody riding a bicycle. But if you yourself have never if you've never ridden the bicycle yourself, you can't know it, or you can't believe it because you haven't had the experience of it. And I think what Neil is saying here is that once you get these things that I just read the passage from God, and they're being saints and saviors, this, that, and the other thing, it's not once you do get on a bike and ride the bike, you have that knowing, and you don't have to, this may not be the greatest analogy, but that's your savior and saint the day you're able to ride the bike, because then you actually have experienced bicycleness and you know the experience. But you can't know the experience of something you yourself have never allowed yourself to do. Did that make any sense at all?
Yeah, yes, no, it makes total sense. But I was just, what brought to mind then was I was talking with someone the other day who had was plastering a wall, and we were discussing it, and I was saying, well, I can't plaster, but I can actually imagine what it's like to plaster, because maybe I've iced a cake or something. 'Cause he was talking about getting the wall very smooth and getting all the little bits out. So I can imagine what that's like, but I don't actually know. I don't know what that just came to my mind there.
Yep,
Hi.
that's exactly.
This is Anne.
Hi, Anne.
That's actually a really, really good example, I think, because if you haven't experienced something, it can't be a reality. And it's the old expression of when Columbus or whatever, came to America, and the Indians, they couldn't see the ships out there because in their reality, they didn't know ships existed. And then when all these people kept coming, all of a sudden a consciousness grew, and it was, well, they had to come from somewhere. And when the idea became that could actually be a reality, then all of a sudden the ships appeared. So it's like, until you experience something, it can't be a reality. You can't share a reality if you haven't had the experience of it. That's my feeling in the context of the way you described the bicycle. If you haven't ridden a bicycle, you can watch it, you can witness it, you can see it, but you'll never know what it's really like to ride a bicycle unless you ride a bicycle.
Right, and I love the analogy you gave, because I think it was the movie The Secret talked about that very same thing, where the natives on the coast of the U.S. they didn't see ships because they didn't have shipness in their consciousness.
They didn't have the consciousness that it existed. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they could only see the little boats that came from the big boat, like the little rowboats.
Right.
That they saw. But the explorers actually drew like in the sand, and then they actually had to take them out till they could feel the boat. They could actually take them and put their hand on it, and then they could start to begin to see it. Yeah, it's a perfect example. I use that example a lot.
Yep, it's a really good example, and I may have mentioned this on this call at some point or another, but the first time I went to South Africa was in 2009, and I was on a night safari, and there's a guy in the Jeep, and he flashes a light so that he might be able to get reflections of eyes, the animal's eyes. And then he can say, oh, look over there, there's a giraffe, or look over there, there's a this. Well, at one point, and that was my first trip, and everybody else who was in that Jeep, there was like 6 of us, had been to South Africa before, except for me. And so the guide was saying, look right there. Oh my God, it's a beautiful rhinoceros. And I was like, I don't see it. And I couldn't see it, and I couldn't see it, and I couldn't see it. And everybody else was going, like, moving my head, going, it's right there. I said, I don't see it. I thought I was looking at a boulder because I only had a boulder consciousness. And suddenly, when that boulder turned its head, I was like, oh my God, I see it. I see it. And it's a really cool thing when you have that experience of what we're talking about here with the boats, bicycles, and rhinoceros. Rhinoceros is the odd thing out. I don't think anybody be riding one of those, but
I'm going to speak of one other thing
Sure.
that relates to something that's called felt perception. When you really feel something, it's a first order experience as opposed to the second order experience. Like when you're 6 months and you're the infant and mommy comes into the room, there's a felt presence of mommy. You can smell mommy. You can just about touch mommy as she comes close. There's a reality of a felt perception that's happening as you're doing it. It's like you're experiencing the experience as you experience the experience. The second order experience is the description of what we're doing now, is when we talk about how it would be or how it was or what we think or how it felt, or it's not being in that moment. So I do a lot of work with felt perception and movement and intrinsic movement. At any moment, I can drop into myself by using that and then going to the breath, by just going within and taking my focus to any little micro movement in my body and just putting my awareness in the middle of my finger or something, but to feel. It's kind of like to move for movement's sake, instead of thinking of just moving my arm to the right, to just be with the experience of moving my arm to the right and feeling what it's like in that moment, to just feel the movement of the arm to the right or something. And this is what's hard. It's hard to describe something that's experiential, because I can talk about it and say what I just said and everybody can listen, but it's not the same as if you just take a minute and dropped in and experienced what it would be like to move your arm to the right, but not as movement, just the felt of how that feels. What does it feel like? And if you can transfer that into everything, it can expand in a lot of different variations. It's like a pebble in the water.
Mm-hmm.
But I could talk all day about it, and no one will really understand. It's only in the doing. It's only in the experience where you really can understand it. I think that's what we're talking about.
I do too. And you made me think of, while you were talking, Anne, that if you have 6 or 7 people together whom only one person has ever tried chocolate ice cream, I could talk till I'm blue in the face, but since you've never experienced the flavor of chocolate ice cream, I can only point to what chocolate ice cream would taste like. But if I give everybody a dish of the chocolate ice cream, then we all actually have the experience, and we can say, oh, I love that, or maybe not for me. So I think it's a really good point. And I think it seems to me a really good tool. So if we're listening to people, and the politics on this side of the pond are, I don't even know what to call it. Maybe if I would stop when I read something and just go, whoa, and say, what is that person experiencing? It doesn't mean I'm going to change my mind. But if I just drop down a little bit and say, what is that person experiencing? That's
what I'm talking about. That's what I call felt perception. How does it feel? So it's embodied, and that's what you're talking about. Is about being embodied, being in the present moment. It's all about just that. It's the felt perception in the right now. Like if we were all to just stop and feel what it is to just take a breath. Everything shifts and brings us together in that one breath.
Well, this has been a great conversation, and
I have a couple of things I'd like to share.
please
that
do.
relate to that.
Please do.
So we have 3 waterfront cabins, and one of the things that I find really interesting is that there will be guests that stay in one cabin that will say, well, we didn't see anything while we were here. We didn't see any wildlife. And in the guest books or from the other guests in the other 2 cabins that stayed during the exact same time, there will be comments about, oh, we saw 6 otters and we saw a whale and we saw eagles and we saw. So it's the people who, and quite often I think it's concrete consciousness. I think a lot of times people who've never lived anywhere but like in cities and aren't used to wildlife, it's like the boats offshore. They don't know what they're looking for. So the stuff is there and it's right there in front of them and they can't see it because they don't know what they're looking for. They don't know what an otter popping out of the water looks like. And so it can happen right in front of them and it's like it never happened. The other thing I wanted to share is that I use that story about the boats offshore. When I drive to Anchorage, I have to drive through about 120 miles of wilderness. And so while I'm doing that, I quite often will be asking Source, okay, what is here that I'm passing that I'm not seeing? I ask the universe to show me what's really there. What have I missed? And, you know, so far I haven't ever seen like I haven't ever seen anything like amazing like a UFO or, you know, I mean, I don't know what I'm thinking is going to show up, but I at least put myself in that mind state of asking to be seen, to be shown what's there that I'm not aware of. So that story about the ships offshore is a real powerful one in terms of reality. And Nanette, before we move on, are you going to talk about the comments about time travel or being, you could be here and you could be somewhere else at the same time?
Let's talk about that. I completely forgot about that.
Because I just had an experience of that. I mean, I've had that experience in many ways, but I just had the experience the other night of, my experience was that I was awake all night, like wide awake and thinking about very specific things. And when I mentioned that to my husband in the morning, he said, well, every time I saw you, you were sound asleep. And I realized that what I'd had was, that was one of those times where I was in my bed and I was also somewhere else. And then I remembered that I used to do that when I was really little all the time. All the time at night. I would be in bed and I would also be somewhere else. And I was aware that I was in bed and somewhere else. So it was fascinating to because I've never heard anybody really talk about that. So that was fascinating in chapter 4 for that to come up.
Isn't that like being in the realm of imagination though, or is it different?
No, I think
are you describing some?
It's very different. Yeah, it's not imagination.
Okay.
You're actually in 2 places at once, or 3 or 4. It can be more than 1. It can be more than 2 even.
Yep.
Actually, that happened to me as a child too, but I kind of lost it. You reminded me, but yeah.
Well, I think for me, I think I have to spend more time with it because I think I may have specifically stopped. consciously chosen to stop. I'm not sure, but I have to, yeah, that chapter brought a lot of that back up that I'd forgotten about.
Well, and I think it's important if you're going, because I haven't even thought about this besides what we read last week, then I completely spaced it out. I can remember, and this was years ago, and this is not the only experience this has happened to me. I was doing a guided meditation with my brother. We were way up high in the mountains in Colorado. And we were sitting in front of a fire, and he was sitting on the hearth, and I was lying down comfortably. And it was in the evening. And he just took me on this guided meditation where I was walking around this lake that was on the property. I could see people, paddling in a boat. I could hear there's all sorts of audible things. And I remember feeling my feet literally on the dirt, because I had bare feet on the dirt, and I was so there, and I was totally experiencing this, and I went, this is cool, and boom, I was back in my body, and I was no longer on my, because as soon as I started to make a comment about how cool it was, it was over. And this actually happened to me the other night, not that one, but the other night, I could swear that I was talking to my brother, who lives in my house with me. And I was asleep, but I remember asking a specific question to him, or he asked me a specific question. I remember specifically answering back. And so it was so real to me that the next morning I said something to my brother. He goes, I didn't, nope, it didn't happen. But I would have sworn on a stack of Bibles that he was standing right next to me. So anyway, I think it's a really interesting thing. And Sarah, I was going to say to you, I don't know if you are aware or have a good book, but I've got a couple of good books on time travel. And it's something, for me, I had to really practice it. Now, as a child, I did not have to practice it. As an adult, I really had to practice it and kind of get in that place where you're not fully asleep, but you're not fully awake. But, I'm not an expert on the subject, so.
I have a story I'd like to share that it kind of relates to this, and it just helps to, I think, illustrate both time and space. Back in 2000, I think it was 2009 or 10, I went to Connecticut to help the daughter of one of my girlfriends who was moving back to Connecticut from Germany, and she had 3 kids. And I was going to be there for 10 days, and I had this chenille scarf I was knitting, and I took it with me so I could finish it because it was February in Connecticut. It was cold. I finished it on the trip, and I wore it on the trip. And on the last day, I was leaving Hartford, Connecticut, and I was I took a private car shuttle from the hotel to the bus place. And then I was going to take the bus down into the city, into New York. When I left the hotel, I was wearing the scarf. It was a hood scarf. So, it covered me, and then it wrapped around my neck. And I was wearing that scarf when I got into the car. And there were several people that saw me wearing the scarf getting into the car. When we got to the bus stop and got out of the car, I was no longer wearing the scarf. And I thought that it had fallen off. And so, we actually pulled the whole back seat out of this limo looking for that scarf, because even the driver saw me get in with the scarf on. So anyway, the scarf has disappeared. It just disappeared. I get in the shuttle, I go, I meet my girlfriend, we drive to New Jersey or to Long Island, where I'm meeting this elderly woman that I had met who had come, she came to Alaska, and it's a ridiculous story. I met her at the emergency room because my husband and I ended up in the emergency room. He did. And I met her because she was there with her husband who was in the emergency room. We struck up this friendship. So here I am, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna visit her. And I walk into her house and she's knitted me a scarf. And the first words out of my mouth were, oh, I really need a scarf. I didn't tell her what had happened, but in that moment, it was like the universe made that all happen, made my scarf disappear. I couldn't have walked into her house wearing the scarf I had just made, because it would have diminished her gift, and she would have either not given it to me or she would have been crushed in some way. If I'd walked into her house wearing that scarf, she would have been crushed. And so the universe fixed it. So not only did I walk in without a scarf, but it was cold weather and I needed a scarf. And I always remember that moment because something happened that day. Something very special happened that day. That scarf is somewhere, I don't know where, but the universe made sure that Francine was able to give me this beautiful scarf that she made, and that I was able to receive it in great need.
That's a beautiful story.
Nature is infinitely intelligent.
Yes, and the power of God is always working.
It is. If you surrender to your divinity, you just have to, especially in these times. I mean, I practice daily, surrendering to divine faith, strength, wisdom, love, all of the ones that, the 10 innate abilities of humanity that from unity. I do it daily. I do it in front of the mirror. Like, there's something going on here that, one mind cannot possibly fathom, but you have to trust. You have to trust that this is evolution. And, even though it might appear that some forces are trying to walk us back 50 years, that's an impossibility. And we are evolving. And, look at all the women in this group. I mean, it's, we're miraculous, and we come together faithfully every week and have for a long, long time, right? Like that's the divine play, working and evolve, like love evolved. The first, it's love spelled backwards, right? It's like evil and live, right? Like they're just, anyway, there's a divine play, and I'm so grateful to be part of it. I'm complete.
I agree with you, Christine. And I just want to add a quick little similar, but not the same story as Linda's. But in 2004, my mother crossed over. And a few months before she crossed over, she bought me this beautiful, gorgeous jacket that probably cost way too much money. But it was just a jacket you could wear with, pants or a skirt. It wasn't something you'd wear outside to be in the winter, but it would, would keep you warm. But it was very African looking. And at that time, I never knew I was ever going to go to Africa. But when I got on the flight to leave Denver to head to wherever I was getting my connecting flight, I had that jacket on and I was waving goodbye. My husband took a picture, and anyway, get to South Africa, and somebody broke into my hotel room. That is the one thing that was taken out of my room. And I was devastated because my mom had said to me, whenever you wear that jacket, my arms will be around you. And I was set aside for like, oh God, a couple of hours, just kind of freaking out. And all of a sudden, it just hit me on the head, and I was like, somebody who doesn't have someone to put their arms around them now has that jacket. And my mother has her arms around me all the time. And that's the way I got past that. Plus, I thought that person had to have needed a jacket more than I did. And so, like, it's not the same as your story, Linda, but it's the kind of thing where if you can pull the pieces together a little bit and think about it just a little bit differently. Because what I was thinking while you were telling your story was somebody else who really needed a scarf got your scarf, and it's just one of those weird things that happen. And I think if we all think like that more often, because that is being present, if you can work through things in your mind and say, I lost this, let it go, whatever it is. And then those miraculous things just kind of go, all come together.
It's like a shift of perspective.
It's like non-attachment, right? Don't be attached to anything. Just, it's like Matt Kahn says, love whatever arises. I had a similar experience. Wow. 5 years ago, I was down at Patty Cota Robles, one of her things down at in Arizona, and I bought this semi-precious stone magnetic bracelet, and it fell off one day, and I thought, well, somebody's got the bracelet, and they're going to really love the bracelet, right? And then about a month later, I found it in the trunk of my car. And so I was happy to have found it again. And so I wore it probably for about another 6 months, and then it really did get lost. But so I just had to trust that whoever found it would love it. And it's a matter of surrendering each moment, isn't it? And we've been programmed. The innocence that we are, it has been programmed to, believe in time and believe in conditioning. And when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and set ourselves free, then, there's no order of difficulty in miracles, because everything is a miracle.
Anne, were you going to say something?
The Course in Miracles says things only have the meaning we attach to them.
Exactly.
It's as simple as that. And what I just wanted to share, because only you guys can understand. So next week's my birthday, and I had shared with a friend of mine about this call that I do every Sunday. And what's ironic is I've never had the books. I just do the phone conversations, and I've never had the books. And so for my birthday, I had mentioned that, and they went in, and they gave me, they had the books 1, 2, and 3, the collection. And so they gave me the book for my birthday. And so anyway,
excellent.
I just wanted to, since the books were about the call, you never know where the universe shows up or something and makes something happen, but how they have no idea how special that meant to me.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And it's funny how you can kind of put something out there like that and say, this is what it is, and then something shows up that's completely unexpected. So it goes back to, I think Linda was saying, or maybe it was Christine, I think it was Linda, asking, to be shown the way, or whatever we were talking about.
Looking at what you can't see.
Yeah, that's right.
But do you realize how many points we made of ways to expand or to just concepts of just ways to have a better moment in each and every one of your days today? There were numerous things today that we talked about on so many levels of different ways that things happen that just bring you joy. That in every given moment, it's like, I think the thing that I really was impressed with was the woman who lives in Alaska or something that drives and asks to see the things that she can't see.
Yep, that's
that
Linda.
She even has a consciousness to want to look for what she doesn't know how to look for, and that she brings that to the table before she even starts the drive.
that was definitely a cool
That's a
comment.
different way to live. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a different reality. Yeah. So that's
Well,
pretty cool.
it was really cool, and thank everybody for any comments that they made. Really appreciate it, and I think we all learned a lot. One of the things I've learned today is that we should spend more time discussing, and whatever comes up, comes up. It doesn't mean we quit reading the book, but maybe, at 20 minutes after the hour, we stop. And it may take us longer to get through the book, but part of this is about the conversations between ourselves, amongst ourselves. And we've all got experiences to share where we can say, oh, yeah, that reminds me of this. And as Ann just said, it's a better way to live. And when you go to your market today or wherever you go, I'm going to say, show me something I'm supposed to see, that I'm not seeing, So anyway, it is 1:02. I love you all. I love this group, and I'm really glad we do this every week, come hell or high water, for the most part. But anyway, until next week, everybody.
Have a great week, everyone. I love you so much.
Love you too.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. God bless.
Bye.
Back to you.